the best financial plan on earth will not benefit anybody if it's not implemented. So we'll just try to latch on to implementations that we really feel we can do. And now's the time. Let's sit down. Let's figure out what this is, and we do the necessary work to actually begin implementing. So that's how it's happening.
Welcome to the Leveraging Success podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt. Every time that we're together, I want to help you work less, make more. And through the freedom that you gain and the margin that you start to store up, you're going to be able to use that to be an incredible husband, wife, parent, and most importantly, an incredible kingdom leader, living the life mission that God put you on. Man, I'm so excited. Again, we are here going live on LinkedIn, broadcasting, and I'm coming to you live from Noah Studios. Noah Elias is an incredible friend, gifted coach, and a part of the master's program. In fact, many years ago, it was Noah and I sitting in a coaching session with our mentor, Bob Schenk, the founder of the master's program. And we together saw our lives completely change as a result of being in the master's program. So grateful that Noah is allowing me to come into his studio. By the way, if you want to catch his podcast, I highly, highly recommend it. The link is going to be in the show notes, but it's called Life by Design. And Noah does a fantastic job of interviewing and getting really good stories along the same lines of what we're doing here is to encourage you. I've got a special guest that I want to tell you about today. It's my friend, brother Tim O'Connor. He's the founder and senior advisor of O'Connor Financial Group. Now, Tim and his team have dedicated themselves to this crucial mission, helping people overcome money anxiety and achieve financial peace of mind. They're not just financial advisors, they're coaches who guide their clients through a totally transformative process, tackling significant financial issues head on. What sets Tim's approach apart is the focus on replacing anxiety with confidence and contentment. And what Tim knows how to do is lead that to a life of significance. His passion lies in empowering clients to experience great freedom in their lives by entrusting their financial matters to his team. Now, this allows these clients to redirect their energy to the places that matter the most in life: their relationship with God, their most important personal relationships, their health, pursuing what brings them joy and fulfillment. And this is what we're all about, right? Is to get leverage from our finances. And this is what Tim does. That's why I'm so excited for you to hear from him. Now, on a personal note, Tim is happily married to Julie and is the proud father of 3 adult children. He's also a very excited grandfather to what he describes as the cutest little girl in the history of cute little girls, a claim I'm sure he'd be happy to defend. Not having Tim a granddaughter yet, I can't come at you with that. So as far as I'm concerned, you're winning there right now. But today we're going to be diving into a topic that affects everybody. It's how do I deal with money? And do I let that creep into fear and anxiety? And how can I get rid of that and make that a place of confidence and contentment? Tim, I'm so excited to have you here to share your insights, your deep wisdom, and to discuss how you're helping people find financial peace to live a life of significance. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having me. This ought to be fun, I hope.
Yeah. Always fun. Great to be able to talk to you. You know, Tim, in the financial world, we're seeing an economy that has ups and downs, everything from what's the impact of inflation? Is it real? What's the market doing? And for many people, when they're dealing with this, they're trying to discern, what do I do? Is it buy now? Is it sell now? Is it get on the sideline? Is it get into the game? How do you operate? And all of those questions, how do you deal with someone that comes in and keeping in mind, I'm imagining the client here is our audience, and our audience are business owners, executives, entrepreneurs that have had a measure of success in their life, and they're trying to convert that success into a life of significance. So if I'm coming into you and I'm saying, what do I do? What do I do? And this is who I am. What are some of the first things that you're talking about to someone like that?
That's the question for most people. And so, in fact, I have a first conversation with somebody here in about less than 2 hours. And that conversation will go a lot like most of the conversations go, well, where I will simply ask him what on earth has led him to sit in an office like mine. Because percentage wise, the people that do it are very small percentile to end up sitting with an advisor. And so, what I'll end up hearing about, what we always end up hearing about, is some amount of significant financial issues that have cropped up in one's life that have just led them to either hear a lot of white noise or be really uncertain as to what all the choices are, where they go with that. And so, what our process begins with is, first of all, a real clear statement after I've heard whatever the issues are, that if I've got confidence based on all the time that we've spent with people over 30 plus years that we can solve it, then what I'll simply say is, wow, those sound like significant financial issues. And we have a specialized practice that, lo and behold, solve significant financial issues. So then this process begins with this tool we call a financial roadmap. We guide them through that. Every person ends up with a customized plan, which is designed not just to solve those issues, but to have them wind up in a spot where they really feel they have delegated those issues now so that they can focus on the rest of their lives.
Now, Tim, the work that you're doing, it's going to take some trust and some ability to even really sort of open the kimono and say, okay, this is where I'm at. This is what I'm dealing with. What does that look like in the trust building? Because really, if I'm going to stay in my expertise and start to outsource some of this, I need to be able to be in a place with someone that I trust. How are you developing that? Because I know you're a coach and you describe yourself that way. How are we getting trust together as you're building that?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think it's one of the most overlooked, valuable currency in history is trust. Nothing happens in the world without trust, and if it does, it has a really weak foundation. And so, it's a hard question to answer just like this because it's baked into the process. Basically, we have a conversation that begins with a really deep dive into the values of the people. And somehow through that process, where we are hardly speaking at all, and they are answering questions but given fullness to reflect. And the only thing we do during this roughly first 15 to 30 minutes, it depends on the conversation, all we're doing is helping them to lean into what they're telling us. So it's a facilitator's role. That's where it seems like it brings down the barriers.
Well, let's talk about what best case scenarios look like, because Tim, you've told me a lot about your success and getting to know what you've done and having the master's program as a common format language between us. I'd like to talk about best case scenarios. What do you think someone with success, but because so many, right, can be successful and let that money be like warm butter on a hot skillet and it doesn't get anywhere, just evaporates. And so the opportunity to really convert that into performing assets, how does that work? Maybe really the question is, what is the best case scenario or end state that you would cast a vision for someone to say, this is where you're going, and imagine when you're there and what you get to do as a result of going through this?
I can answer that question really specifically. There's a couple aspects to it. First, we've been able to just be. It's a grace of God. I have no doubt. We've served over now 101 households that we've gone their entire lives with. If it's a couple, with the couple, or if it's a single person, it's a single person, all the way until the household has to be, liquidated after death. So 101 households that we've coached all the way to their finish line, and every single one of them made it, which is really encouraging. We started counting that up some years ago. We were kind of amazed at what we were seeing, and it keeps going on to this day. But that isn't even the most important thing. It's great to be able to point to all these households that have had success. But more importantly, what we do is we will periodically just do little surveys just to see where our clients are at. We're in the middle of a year where we're doing one of those surveys. And it's a really simple survey. We'll repeat this every 4 to 5 years, just kind of when we feel like we want to just get back into their minds. And the question goes like this: on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your financial contentment? 1 would be you have zero contentment. 10 would be you are so content, your picture could be in the dictionary next to contentment. Where would you put yourself on that scale? So we've been taking this all year, and the predominant answers we're getting is between 9 and 10, which is just music to our ears. We have many people calling themselves perfectly content with their finances, which is completely contrary to the way the world leads people to be with their finances. And so that's the best barometer that we have, is our very own client testimonies.
So contentment's very relative, right? And that is a decision that everyone has to make as to when is enough enough. So how are you walking them through developing contentment or finding the line? How are you helping them to comprehend that? Because, I mean, Tim, you could make me fantastically successful in multiplying my resources, but maybe I never get to contentment. What conversation should we have to get to contentment?
Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into any of our levels of contentment. It is a very subjective answer, which is why we feel such gratitude that we're getting that answer so much, because it's different things for different people. If somebody says, for example, they're a 9, the question that I always follow up with is, okay, great. If you were to be a 10, no matter how much fantasy has to be in your answer, what would it take for you to be a 10? We get almost the same answer every time we bring it up. And then there's a really rare second. The first one is, I can just never ever give myself the opportunity to be that content, so I always got to leave room. I'm like, okay. And then the second answer is, if I had another, usually it's at least $1 million more or some other figure like that. And so if someone does bring up the thing about some more money, I'll usually be able to say, I don't remember not being able to say this, but I'm answering this in case I skipped it once or twice. But what I'll say is, hey, we've known each other for a while. Can I have permission to coach you or say something contrary? Depends on how I'll use something along the lines. They'll give me that permission. And then what I'll say at that point is, you can only take this with trust at this point. If you want to talk about it further, I'm happy to. But I will tell you this: if some magic fairy walked in, was floated in this room, dropped another $1 million into your accounts right now, you wouldn't feel any more content than you do right now. I can promise you that. And then what's also baked into that is trying to help people have a sense of enough. If they have a sense of enough, and they truly participate in that exploration, it really helps them to get to that place.
I'm here with Tim O'Connor. Tim, you're a financial expert, and what you are dropping thus far is really the basics. It's the beginnings of, okay, I can't do this on my own. And anybody that has wanted to go from the sort of home gym DIY of physical strength to really creating strength that's incredible, impressive, extraordinary, they go find an expert, they go find a coach. And so going and being with you at the beginning, you're helping them to get oriented to, what does healthy look like? How do you really start to accelerate? And imagining then that a lot of our listeners may have some system that's allowing them to sustain their success, Let's talk about kingdom class operating, because uh, I know, and we had an opportunity to catch up on this before we started the show today, is that contentment can be a leverage point. In fact, if you could decide for yourself what enough is, can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that you and Julie have made some radical discussions that have made for amazing opportunities. And let's go up the next level and talk about what kingdom class looks like, or kingdom class financial management. So could you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing around drawing that line?
Yeah, well, it begins with, if you were to, mine the scriptures for everything that they have on the topic of money and possessions. And there is a really good book, long book, kind of a deep and tough and dry book, but it's called Neither Poverty Nor Riches by Craig Blomberg. And that book, what it basically says, because he really did what I just described. He really mined everything that's in there, and it's really pretty much summarized in one book. And the way he summarizes the whole of what Scripture tells us about money and possessions is that disciples of Christ are to follow financially conservative. They're to be financially conservative and extraordinarily generous, radically generous with what they have. That's the whole of what Scripture tells us about that. And so one of the things that's so great about my marriage to Julie, there's a lot that's great about that, but one of those is that she is in this. I like to say we're in it to win it, and she is such a good opposing, complementary force to my own, because she has kept us on the path of being financially conservative far better than I would have had I been left to my own devices. Where that's left us is this place where we've done the exercise to figure out what is enough for us. In other words, out of the resources that flow into us, what do we really need to live the life that we feel like aligns with what we read and where our desires are and all these things. And where it's brought us to is that we now, again, by the grace of God, have a situation where the resources that flow in through our practice are quite a bit above that enough number. And one of the challenges that people have, Christians and non alike, is that we tend to increase our lifestyle commensurate with the increase in the resources. And we figured out what that number is and decided not to play that game. And so then what we do is we simply have this number. We know what it is that we need to set aside to live on in the coming months. And then everything over and above that, it goes away. It either goes back into the practice to help some of the people here. We'll use it to bless employees. But a whole lot of it goes out, pointing to windows, out there, predominantly into gospel-centered organizations. But it goes into some other things too that we just want to be encouragers.
Okay, so Tim, so many thoughts, right? Because you're talking about your marriage and being to be on the same page. Often I find, and this, you can dispute this, is that one's the spender, one's the saver, sort of stereotypically. One is one and one's the other, perhaps. But then you need to come together towards some sort of agenda. So how did you do it? How did you do that with Julie? How did you guys get to the same place where you could say, this is the cut line for us. This is as far as the house is going to eat, and everything above that is going out the door to the things we're passionate about. How did you get there?
Well, a lot of grace, really, and time, and marinating in this stuff. So I'm a member of an organization which you got to participate in some this year, called Kingdom Advisors. It's a national organization of Christian financial advisors, and I've been what's called a certified Kingdom Advisor, since 2007. So it's a long time now. But I only started going to their conferences in 2018. I'm not sure. Still can't account for why I never seem to get to the conference. But we've been going ever since 2018. And so with my certification, which is a very deep dive into all these things, and then sitting under many teachers at that conference, we've marinated in this stuff for so long that it just kind of seeped into us. And finally, we just got to a place where instead of just having it be head knowledge, we just decided to really focus on practicing and implementing. The best financial plan on earth will not benefit anybody if it's not implemented. So we'll just try to latch on to implementations that we really feel we can do. And now's the time. Let's sit down. Let's figure out what this is, and we do the necessary work to actually begin implementing. So that's how it's happened. But I'll tell you this: we also, another thing that we're involved in that just goes along with this is we are facilitators of a thing called the Journey of Generosity. It's through a not-for-profit called Generous Giving that you may have heard of. And so where we can put a group together and facilitate one of those, it's a deep dive into biblical generosity. And it's one of those things where the more we do it, in fact, I was just writing something up about this, where if you compared it to peeling the layers of an onion back, this is really what we have found. Every time we peel back the onion of generosity and go deeper into it, what we find inside there is a life that is more beautiful, more colorful, and more adventurous than the one that we had left behind at a lesser level of generosity. I mean, the places we've gone, the things we've gotten to do are just, to us, astounding.
Yeah, it's so neat because I know that you go out into the field where you give. So in other words, you're planting your feet where your money's going so that you can see the outcomes. And I think that that's an important part of collaborating with your spouse on being radically generous. When we get our receipts every month, I'm high fiving with Heather and saying, look what we gave. Or when the year's numbers are all together and the tax guy is telling me, what we did, and we always, exceed what we can claim, but then we turn it around and we're able to say, look what God did, and you get excited. And I think there's some needed nurturing of the celebrating the wins, celebrating the giving, going out on trips and seeing where the ministry's at. You guys do that, I know, with things like Water Mission, for instance.
Yeah, and which is how through Water Mission that I encountered you through a number of people who are part of the master's program. And so, yeah, we were in Tanzania a year ago with Water Mission, and it was just a really cool, neat time where the time we've had on those sorts of outings have really exceeded. We've gotten to go to great places on some vacations, and wouldn't want to give those back. We enjoyed them too much, but it always seems to be better when we do a trip with some like-minded people around the generosity that we're all pouring out on this organization, whatever it is. In that case, it was Water Mission.
Yeah, man, that's great. So, one of the things that we talk about is that faith is spelled RASK, right? And when we get into the financial space, we can really tell where our faith's at by what the outflows of our spending looks like. And if I were to take, you were to take my monthly bank statement and say, okay, where did all the money go? You really have a sense of what my priorities are. And so I think, Tim, what I want to be able to dispel here is that don't wait until you think you're fully funded or content to get into the giving game. How do you coach people into being radically generous so that they're not waiting again till some imaginary age or figure in their net worth before they start being radically generous? What do you do to try to help me think about why be radically generous now?
The truth of the matter is we are always, we feel like sometimes we're beating our head against the wall inside this office to find winsome ways to talk about this. So I want to be real careful. I don't want anyone taking from me that, yeah, not only are my wife and I leading generous lives, but everybody that comes here becomes radically generous. I don't want to, and sometimes we don't always get a full grasp of what people are doing. So all we can do is, like any good coach does, is try to remind. We try to keep stories filtering into the conversation, and just remind and encourage. That's what we try to do. And then periodically, people let us all the way into learning about the level of generosity that's being practiced. Other people will remain, somewhat private about those things. So it's different for everybody. But I think you were. I think it was Billy Graham who first said that if you want to if you want to check where someone's heart is, just look at their checkbook. And so we just try to identify and remind. And the other thing that I know you've got some background with Dan Sullivan. I repeat I quote him from a long time ago, a longer time than I wish, more than almost anybody, when I'm just venturing into this with somebody, because there's a whole lot of layers beyond this. But it's a nice place to start when it's new, which is, there's two things, this is what Dan said, there's two things you won't ever see go together: someone who is generous with their money to ever be in want for anything. And I just remember hearing that for the first time, and it was totally new to me. And he was humble about it, and I'm mirroring his humility. He didn't say, and I'm not now saying, that it's impossible to happen. I just haven't yet found the person who's in want for anything. And the thing that really, and one of the things that really motivated me in our journey, and these are all things I just try to share, it's just like dripping. But there's a guy, long since gone from a long time ago, named R.G. Letourneau, and he was well known, very wealthy man. He ended up doing the reverse tithe, which is, he kept 10% of the money and gave away 90 of what he made. And I remember being so blown away by that. And so anyway, those are just some reflections on your question. It's an imperfect. There is no recipe like making a smoothie, where you put in these inputs and you get this delicious, perfect, radically generous life.
I think it really just comes down to, what do you want said about you in the end, and what do you care about, what you're passionate about. And the more that I concentrate on the end, the meaning, the why, then it leads to, well, then it's a simple decision, because I want to be able to be generous like this, and to have the outcomes that I'm hoping for. That process. What are some of the questions that we should entertain as people who are successful and looking to have significance? How do we as a couple ask certain questions that help us to decide, like you guys have decided, what your line is, what we want to save, how do we give? What would you suggest to be some of the questions that would be really good, date night sort of, let's talk, honey, about what we care about?
Yeah, there's a couple levels that's coming to mind. I guess if you start with where generosity almost always starts, because, and this is the way our brains get wired, almost always seems to start with money and possessions. And it's more than that. I had a recent cool, well, it was a cool conversation to me by a friend of mine, and I think it adds to what I'm going to say to you. So it begins, if you start with where we tend to start, which is the money. There's just two simple levels to go to with what happens to the money on a regular basis. The expenses that we've got in our life that we cannot escape. It always starts with that. And then it gets into all the things that we've built in that we simply just like, right? And so when you add those two, the first number is the number you absolutely have to have. I mean, obviously we have to pay utilities and things like that. Once you get beyond the things we absolutely cannot escape, all the basic bills, the food and things like that, gas in the tank, everything else in that is a want. And then when we add up with those two things, that can be a starting point. Bear in mind that second column, which is the things we just desire, we've just come up with because we happen to like or love those things. And that can then be compared to, hey, what are the resources that are flowing in? And then that is the opportunity then to set, hey, I think it was Randy Alcorn just came to mind, which was in some of our recent materials at session 6, which is that God doesn't prosper us to increase our standard of living so much as to increase our standard of giving. And that's Randy's version of speaking to that same Craig Blomberg book that I quoted earlier, is to, as prosperity grows, and even in want, it is really good to begin with, hey, what's God asking me to do with this? Because the most basic, one of my favorite verses that someone turned me on to over 20 years ago, I believe it's Ephesians 4:28. If not, it's right around that number. But basically, he says, "Let the thief no longer steal, but let him have something to do with his hands to work, so that he may have something to give." The whole purpose of work, according to Paul in Ephesians, is to give. And so, if we look at our finances with a fine tooth comb, with an eye toward what of all this can be given, I think that's where it starts, and it's something that can be tested at different levels. No one has to jump into the deep water right off the bat, but we've tested it and tested it and tested it. We keep pushing, trying to push for us what's the boundary. I want to be clear. This is, and I'm quoting somebody else from the journey of generosity, but this is no Mother Teresa life that we're living. It is not. But what it is, as I said, it's this ever evolving, deepening sense of generosity. But one quick thing I'll add to that, which is really good for a date night conversation, is this: what's been opened up to me lately is that every single thing in our life can be and really should be looked at as, God says in the scriptures, what do you have that you have not received? And everything is from Him. And so I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, and he was reminding me. He goes, "Well, you know what Aristotle said about friendship, don't you?" To which I go, "No, I don't know what Aristotle said about friendship." And basically, what he defined friendship as, it's really rich. He said friendship is about willing the good of another, to will the good of another. And boy, when you stop and think about, if you think about increasingly radically generous financial lives, combined with a spirit of generosity that wills the good of every single friend and relationship and person you encounter. If you think of a world filled with people like that, then you get to a place where my friend Nick Murray might say that you really can't find the end of the good that comes of that life.
It's the whole pay it forward model. At the end, we don't have a supply problem. We've got a distribution problem, right? The supply is there. We need to open it up and get it into movement. But when we start talking about radical generosity, I think there's two extremes that come into play. One is when I was first creating my first budget as a young adult, and I thought to myself, well, there goes all my fun. I won't be able to have any fun. I've got a budget now. You lock me up. I don't have anything but restrictions on me. And what I know about you is that you didn't pencil out fun from your equation with your line. You've got that planned in, and that there's an expectation to continue to enjoy. So, there's that one thing that we may be saying to ourselves as well. To be radically generous is to imagine the fun's gone. And the other extreme is one of my favorite memories of you, Tim, when we first met. One of the first things you were telling me is look, how many more steak dinners can I have? to compare this filet mignon versus that filet mignon, at the end of the day, it's not, it's, I can't consume that much. I'm not going to find an end to this, no matter how some chef says that he put this sauce on that steak, right? And so the other extreme is that I've chased an unending like food experience and vacation experience, but never being satisfied. But to that place of radical generosity that says that we've got a plan and we're excited about a plan. We hold the belt of our expenses, not because we're going to eliminate fun, but because that we imagine that all of this extra is an opportunity to do what you just said about friendship, right? Jesus said, use your wealth to make friends for yourself so that when it's all gone, you'll be welcome into heavenly places, right? And so that opportunity to then be a kingdom entrepreneur, to be giving not willy-nilly, not just sort of throwing it out into the streets and saying whoever can get it, but to make purpose out of it, to bring outcomes out of it. Man, it's a special approach that you're suggesting people take.
That's kind of, you put it that way. We found it to be is a life giving approach. Those nice things, whether it be the food or the travel or what have you, they're nice things, but they just haven't given the life like I was describing before we came on, where my wife and I just got back from talking to some people, 3 different groups that we partner with, all of them now at this point. One of them was brand new to us, one's deepening, and one is continuing. And when we were wrapping up that weekend in Chicago after these meetings, which were dominated by these meetings with these various ministry partners, we just felt good. I mean, we just had it was a good kind of tired. We were ready to get home, but it was just different, even than coming back from, a bucket list type of trip, that was all fun. You see what I'm saying? It's just a real richness to it that's hard to describe, but ever present. And it's the thing. It kind of like the great meal that ends up making you feel too full, like you now need to exercise to get rid of some of that. The after effects of this trip that we just had, that have been describing, just leaves you feeling, still makes you feel just appropriately full and healthy. It's just a total difference.
And you're teaming with your wife in this, right? And I think that everything from pickleball to radical generosity, every time that we get to do something together and I'm talking about Heather because we've taken up pickleball together here recently, but every time we get to do something together where there's something on the line that matters, and pickleball doesn't compare to radical generosity, but just the feeling that we're on purpose together. And look what God's using us to do. And we care about this a lot. For Heather and I, we love the Middle East. We care, deeply about the persecuted church there. And so the ability to affect it, go out, be with it, pray with people, have friends in that place. It enriches our conversations. It enriches our vacation plans and everything that we're doing, so that it has an element of, this is something that will matter, and it will matter. It'll matter forever. And I think that's the kind of contentment or full sense that you have, and you get to share with your spouse. It's pretty special, right?
It is. It's been special. Periodically it's hard. She is my best coach, and she has happily stood in the way as I was much newer in this journey. She has kept us on this path that we've now gotten all the way onto together, much better than I would have on my own without her, or if she was just totally submissive to my last whim. I'm not sure we'd be in this place right now. But I'm thankful for her steadfastness, because now we are absolutely in sync on this, as we have been for some years. But 20 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been in this place yet.
I'm here with Tim O'Connor. And Tim, your process that I think you've explained so far is that if money is leaving you anxious or fearful, next level is to get to contentment and get a plan in place. And once you've got a plan and you're operating with that and you're finding contentment, kingdom class opportunity leads you to say, how about we try our God and see if we can outgive him, and if he won't open up the storehouse of heaven on us, a la Micah 3. And so if we were to imagine a life of ongoing giving, then this will be a snowball that turns into an avalanche, and that avalanche creates giving that we do on purpose, that we direct that momentum towards things that matter forever. And this is all about getting leverage from our success and not taking for granted what God's given to us, and imagining that what we've been given is an opportunity to put that into play. Anything missing from what I think you've laid out as what would be the optimal scenario for anybody with success?
The optimal scenario is, and I think this, but the thing is that what I'm about to say extends into almost anything, and that is to have a systematic, comprehensive plan of action, preferably in writing. This is no different than we've heard about certain people who've written down goals for themselves, preferably in writing, that becomes one's essentially their constitution for their money and finances. And as long as then the actions that are required to carry out that plan are clearly articulated and, once again, ideally written, ours are written, and then those things can be followed in sometimes almost a checklist like manner. And once they're followed, then that allows the person who's truly implementing, taking action on their plan, then can enjoy the benefits of having delegated the details of that to somebody else, so that they can, which becomes us in the people who choose us, then they can then focus on the rest of their lives, just like you described at the outset. And that to me is an optimal scenario, because then that enables whatever that looks like in their life to have the best opportunity to be to become real in their world.
In session 6 that you mentioned earlier, what we talk about is building the foundation of your beliefs and your plan and your strategy, and then show up to a kingdom advisor like you that can come and say, okay, this is what I believe about my money. It's not mine. I'm the steward, not the owner. That I'm not a lover of this. It's a tool, a great tool. And as much as God's given me of it, I want to multiply it. And then I want to go through a certain set of questions for myself and then with my spouse, so that when I show up to meet with someone like you, I'm coming with a preset plan base that you can operate with and help to steer me. Otherwise, I'm really a bit rudderless, except for just simply deciding what are my priorities. But my priorities need to be, grounded in this is God's. It's not mine. He gave it to me to be a manager of it. And so I want to be found as the wise manager, and not the one that squandered it and burned it up all on my own. So I think getting to a place of vision and what you want in the end. I'm coming back to that again. It's just so essential to doing something extraordinary and building a plan, because in imagining it and then speaking it and then writing it into a plan all helps me to be directed and live by design and not by default. And the default piece is one that, again, leads to regret. And that's what you get by working with someone like you is the ability to live a life by design and not just having it happen to me, but rather aiming for something specifically.
I mean, there's nobody that's ever accomplished anything of any significance that got there by accident. And so, and all these things though are grounded for followers of Christ. And we don't serve all Christ followers. We are happy to help anybody, and we want to be, light to everybody that we can. But for followers of Christ, what this really becomes about is this is financial discipleship, and what that really means is that God then, through His Word, which has absolutely perfect advice on money and possessions, through His Word, He is shaping us so that we can be in every way that He's shaping us. It's about shaping us so that we can have as many obstacles as possible that He removes, so we can focus our love and attention on Him, and then to love His people. And so all of it is from a place of love for Him, and that's all He's trying to do. He is not a God that is trying to suck fun out of our life. He's trying to show us where life really lies, which is in Him. And so that's in His mercy. That's what He's trying to do with all of these scriptural guidances on money and possessions.
All right, Tim, I'm going to throw you a curveball here. I don't think it's that big of a curveball. It's in your wheelhouse, but let's see where you land. Tell me, what do you see as a how do you look out onto the market? What should people be expecting in terms of not exact financial advice, but when you look at the papers and you're reading the news, what's your mental approach to consuming that and deciding where are we at from a market, from a economy standpoint?
Because we get asked this pretty regularly, and it's natural. We never begrudge the question, but our in the gentlest, kindest way that if it's me answering, I'll allow for what I know where that question comes from. But being that we are following a financial strategy that entails the rest of your life, which, mind you, for a couple at the age of 60, the odds that one of them hits 90 is very, very high in this day and age. Yeah, very, very high, which means that for a lot of 60-year-olds, we're still looking at a 30-year time horizon. And so most of what ends up on the headlines right now has no impact on a lifelong financial strategy. We rest on the creativity and the capability of the companies, which are outstanding. It's where all the money in the world comes from, and so we rely on them, and they have performed to provide in remarkable ways. It's amazing what God has enabled companies to do, and so we rest on we sit on their backs in some ways to let them do what they do.
Well, I had my finger on the buy button, so I was waiting to decide based on your answer. But I know that the idea here is that you see things over the long haul, and that the idea that somehow that this is going to get it done via day trading or sort of herky-jerky movements isn't the move of something that's methodical and well planned out. But the same thing goes for our giving plan, is that radical generosity isn't who can ring the bell the loudest on me, who can pull my heart the hardest in a moment where I wasn't ready, but rather to say, these are the things that we've got the most passion about. These are the things we want to give to. And rather than waiting to be asked, we're going to be out in front. We're going to be saying, these are the topics that we're interested in. Here's our allocations. And we see it like a portfolio, our giving, so that it's not just sort of spur of the moment, but something that we act as a fund, no matter how big that fund is, to be givers towards that end, to see the outcomes. Sound right to you?
I mean, I guess to summarize both the last question and this one, it still would be, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells us to seek first the kingdom of God, his righteousness. Whenever we do that, I think all of the particulars, the things that can trip us up, all the way down to the things that day traders are trying to follow, I think everything just comes into line for us. It just does. And in his sovereignty, it just seems like that's the way it's worked out. We've got 33 years of track record on this. And don't get me wrong, as I answer that prior question, I am a capitalist. I am a capitalist. But we also know the statistics. And if there was a reliable way to be taking anything other than a long-term view, we would be doing it because of what I just said. I'm a capitalist, and so that's the way we look at it. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness. I think he then gives all the wisdom as we need it, day to day, to carry these things out in the best way possible that focuses on lifting up his glory, gladdening our hearts, and loving his people.
Tim, it's been so good to be with you here. This conversation and wisdom is a way to reset, and it's not something that you set one time. I think that financial discussions is something that takes routine check-ins, check in on the plan. How far have I come? Am I getting where I hope to measure? And with those measurements and being with a coach, my opportunity is to really get that wisdom implemented, that it's not just something talked about or conceptual, but really to make it go really far. So thank you, Tim, so much. By the way, Tim's LinkedIn contact is going to be in the show notes. You have the ability to reach out to him and ask more questions, or find a Kingdom advisor with whom you can be actively doing this, because radical generosity is a process of leveraging your success into significance. So I want to thank you all again so much for joining us for another episode of Leveraging Success. I'm so glad that you came here. I'd love for you to continue on this journey with me. So please follow the podcast and subscribe on YouTube and hit that bell so you don't miss any episodes. Also, I love your feedback. So thank you for those of you who are doing that, whether you're responding on LinkedIn, commenting on YouTube. You can also send me an email, because I'd love your review on the podcast as well as getting your direct feedback. You can email me at jeff@leveragingsuccesspodcast.com to tell me what you think of this show. What would you like to hear more of? Also, what are your questions? I would love to address them live here on this show. Also, finally, I'm excited to tell you about the second half surge that's coming up on July 1st. Join us for this free masterclass, which we will focus on how to make the rest of 2024 matter forever. You can go to www.PriorityLiving.org/second half surge, all one word, second half surge. The link is in the notes. Type that in. I want you to register, because we are hosting the keys to arrange an incredible outcome for this year while you're aiming to work less and make more. You can join us on July 1st. It's going to be 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific Time via Zoom. We'll have you there for an hour to give you some incredible insights as to how you can make the rest of the year matter. Again, so glad you're here with us today. So grateful, Tim, for your time here with us. We're aiming to work less, make more, and take the gain to be incredible, extraordinary, and having an impactful life that will matter forever into eternity. I'm your host, Jeff Gerhardt, here at Noah Studios. Big thanks to Noah Elias, Griffin Elias, for hosting me today. And until next time, God bless you.